Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
In our Cut the Clutter episode 764, that's yesterday, we reviewed the Prime Minister's speech changing or reversing India's vaccination policy and also making provision of more free food grain to the poor until November. Now, while I did that, and a lot of you watched it, some smart ones amongst you, and I have to say, many of you are much smarter than me. That's the reason I missed the point, but you caught it. So I missed a trick. I can always give the excuse to say that, oh, I spoke too soon after the Prime Minister's speech, so I had not had the time to apply my mind. But the fact is that I must acknowledge that many of you, in fact, most of you are smarter than me. So you caught the trick that I had missed. And that was, if the Prime Minister was simply reversing the policy from letting the states to buy vaccines to now getting the center to buy vaccines, then first of all, what was the big deal that the states were making about wanting to buy the vaccine themselves? What is it that many of the critics of the government, including me, of the earlier policy, which was one size fits all over centralized, what were we complaining about? Because if the center allowed the states to buy vaccines and they've not been able to buy it, and they've themselves been asking the center to reverse the policy, and the center has reversed the policy. So what is the story? What is the big deal? Now, before I tell you what is the big deal, I have to first tell you a story and then give you a warning. So the story is from one of the most enduring and popular and quoted, sometimes misquoted, sometimes quoted in context, out of context, but a book called Catch-22 by Joseph Heller, published in 1961. So whether you've read the book or not, you know this is a Catch-22 situation. This is a Catch-22 situation. Oh, so-and-so is caught in a Catch-22 situation. You use that phrase in many places. So that's one. And the second is a warning. Warning is that you have to know a little bit of simple arithmetic. I mean, just enough to pass your math paper in class 5, 6, 7, which is what I barely managed to do. And once again, since most of you were better in math in class 4, 5, 6, 7 than I was, you will figure it out. Because this is just a simple arithmetical calculations with additions, subtractions, multiplications, and division. Simple arithmetic. No calculus, no algebra, no geometry, no trigonometry, nothing. Simple arithmetic. Now, first of all, why does this make me think of Catch-22? Now, the central character in Catch-22 was a man called First Lieutenant Milo Minderbender. Now, Milo Minderbender is like in charge of the mess, or maybe the supply chief or the provisions chief. Officer in Yossarian's legendary, for all the wrong reasons, squadron in Second World War. And as you would remember, if you've read the book, this was an air defense squadron with anti-aircraft guns. Now, Milo Minderbender was an entrepreneur. He was also a capitalist, except that he did business with himself. So what did he do? He was in charge of the mess. So he was purchasing stuff for the kitchen, for the mess. And this is a large mess for a lot of troops. So he would go to the village where his unit was posted and buy up in the morning all the supplies of key provisions. That is meat, chicken, eggs, tomatoes, potatoes, whatever. He'll buy it all up personally. So then he became a monopoly seller, right? So he could control the price. Then he fixed a higher price. And then he found a buyer. And who was the buyer? Buyer was his unit. Where is the problem? Armies have so much money, and armies cannot march on empty stomachs, right? So his army had to buy, his unit had to buy. So he sold it to his own unit. So basically, this was like he was taking money out of one pocket, putting it into the other, and in the process making a profit. And for him, it was only the government that was losing. So where is the problem? The entrepreneur was making money, so this was capitalism. So he became the most enduring symbol of global capitalism, or what's wrong with global capitalism, or with the critics of global capitalism. Now, there were times when he got ahead of himself. Again, from the book. So there was a time when he bought up so much Egyptian cotton, because he kept on getting more and more ambitious, because this circular trading was a fantastic business. So he bought up so much Egyptian cotton that there was nobody left to buy Egyptian cotton, because he wanted to control the price. So once he had bought up all the Egyptian cotton in the world, even if he sold it to somebody bought it from him, he again came back and sold it to him, to Milo Minder Bender, because he had to control the cotton price all over the world. And suddenly he had too much cotton and no buyer. So what did he do? At one point, he even dipped those balls, made balls of cotton, dipped them into chocolate and tried to sell those to his own mess, to his unit's mess as candy. That didn't work, and then said, let me find one buyer who will never be short of money, and that will buy it. Who's the buyer? That buyer is the government, in this case the government of United States of America. And then how did he justify that, being a capitalist? He said that President Calvin Coolidge, who was, there are so many quotable quotes in his name that sometimes you wonder what is true, what is not true. He ferreted out a quote from President Calvin Coolidge of America, and that quote was, "It is the business of the government to be in business." So he said, look, it may be right or wrong. I mean, I'm a capitalist. I don't want governments to be in business. But this was said by an American president. So if an American president said it, it must be right. So he sold it to the government, because once again, a businessman makes money. Anybody can make money as long as the government is paying. So why am I telling you this long old story? I do believe that a lot of you at least are familiar with Catch-22. In fact, more of you may have read more of it than I have done or seen the movie. Now, the reason I'm telling you this is that this perfectly explains what this government's so-called liberalized vaccine purchase and distribution policy was. And this is where I will challenge your skills at arithmetic. You will see all this happening on my screen also, because I have smarter younger people than me who will sit and break it down on the screen for you. But this is very simple calculation. And then you will know why the scheme that the government announced earlier of so-called liberalization and decentralization of vaccine distribution was nothing but a pure Milo Minder Bender Catch-22 scheme. Now, this is what happened when government liberalized or decentralized the scheme. Central government not only decentralized or liberalized or decontrolled, that is more suitable given our history of controls and licenses, decontrolled the purchase and sale of the vaccines, they did it only partly. First of all, they said, so think of a company, Serum Institute or Bharat Biotech, we'll take both, because both manufacture vaccines in India. They both produced 100 vaccines each. So central government said 50 of this you will give to me, 25 to any of the states who come buying from you, and 25 to the private sector. So far, so good, no problem. So we can say, look, I'm taking half because I'm giving it to everybody above 45 for free. You can buy more, you can give it to other age categories, whether you want to charge them or not is your business. But this is where we begin to run into trouble. The trouble is that the central government also decreed that there will be differential pricing. Now the pricing will be differential. People like us also said it's fine if the pricing can be open, should be open free market for the private sector. So let the private sector buy at whatever price the market will take, or import at whatever price the market will take. It's an open market, free market, and then sell it to whoever is willing to pay that market, because that market runs purely on market principles. But when the government buys, whether it's a central government or the state government, should there be two prices? Good question. What is your answer? Because it's the same government, it's the same country. हम सब उसी भारत माता की संतान हैं. We are all, whether central government, state governments, BJP governments, non-BJP governments, Congress governments, left government, all of us, DMK government, Mamta's government, we are all Bharat Mata's children. So why should the government or government entities have different pricing? So central government said 50% we will buy at a price of 150. That price we have fixed. The rest now is between the buyers and these sellers. These buyers, private sector, no problem. but 25% state governments also. We are not saying that thou shalt sell, that is Serum Institute and Bharat Biotech, thou shalt sell to the state governments also at the same price at which we buy from you, because you know what? We are the big daddies, right? These states are chutka putkas, so let them come and deal with you. But we've taken 50% on our price, on a fixed price, that is 150. Now what happened? And thereby lies the story. So take out your pencils or your mental calculators or your calculators. It is very simple. So think that Bharat Biotech, Serum Institute, both produce 100 vaccines each, 100 doses each. For simplicity, I've kept the base number very low, 100. Now, the price that at which both are selling 50%, 50 of these 100 to the central government is the same, that is 150. Then each one fixes a separate price for the states and the private sector. Bharat Biotech, and see this will run on the screen, Bharat Biotech runs for the state governments a price of 400 rupees and for the private sector 1200 rupees. So 150, 400, 1200, three prices. But 50 out of the 100 have gone to the central government at 150. Then Serum Institute, when they produce 100, 50 go to the central government at 150, as we know. 25 to the states go at 300 rupees a piece, and then remaining 25 to the private sector go at 600 rupees a piece. So see the two categories, Bharat Biotech, Serum Institute, each one producing 100 vaccines. Now what happens? Now very simple calculation. Bharat Biotech, 50 into 150, that is the 50 that central government buys, they make a revenue of 7,500 rupees. Very simple. Your neighborhood grocer will do it from the top of his head, no problem. Then the next 25 that the state governments will buy, they'll buy at 400 rupees a piece. So that 25 will cost them 10,000 rupees. So Bharat Biotech will collect 10,000 rupees for 75,000 vaccines sold and 17,500 rupees collected. Then the remaining 25, private sector will buy at 1,200 rupees a piece. So that will become another 30,000 rupees. So Bharat Biotech for 100 vaccines would net 47,500 rupees, of which only 7,500 will come from the center for half the doses. Similarly, look at the other calculation, Serum Institute. Serum Institute produces, this is just like our class 4 or 5 mathematics teacher will teach us that presume there is only this much and then calculate. So Serum Institute produces 100 vaccines. 50 go to the central government at 150 a piece, so 7,500 rupees, the same as Bharat Biotech. 25 go to the states. So for 25 at 300 rupees, it gets 7,500 rupees. That is as much as the center has paid for 50. Then the remaining 25% go to the private sector at 600 rupees, because the price, as we told you, that Serum Institute has set up for the state governments and the private sector is 300, 600. Price that Bharat Biotech set up is 400, 1,200. So with this, for 100 vaccines sold, Serum Institute will collect 30,000 rupees. The center will pay out of this only 7,500 rupees for 50. For remaining 50, they will collect 22,500 rupees. That is the story. Now take out the average. The average that Serum Institute collects per vaccine produced out of 100 is 300 rupees. Again, the center has paid only half the price, and that is for half of all the production from Serum Institute. Similarly, if you apply the same test to Bharat Biotech, the average revenue that Bharat Biotech has per vaccine is 475. Again, half of its production the center has taken at only 150 rupees, which is less than 1/3 of 475. From Serum, center has bought at half. From Bharat Biotech, center has bought at less than 1/3. Now, average for others other than the center. If you take out average for others other than the center, for Serum Institute is 450. So 450 for Serum Institute is 3 times of what the center is paying. So center buys 50% at 150. The rest private sector in the states buy at an average of 3 times as much from Serum. Similarly, from Bharat Biotech, it gets more fun. With Bharat Biotech, the center gets at 150, but the other buyers who buy the remaining 50% pay 800 rupees on an average. So they pay 5.33 times more than the central government. Once again, I have zero problem with what the private sector is paying, because private sector is not offering these for free. So private sector will charge. If you want it, you pay for it, you pay for it. If you don't pay for it, want to pay for it, you go for a government facility. But state government now, I'm just making it as simple as possible and repetitive, but necessarily so because it is important. For state government, the cost of 50 of Bharat Biotech will be 20,000 rupees. Whereas for the central government, the cost for 50 Bharat Biotech will be 7,500 rupees. So state government for the same vaccine is paying about 3 times. Similarly, for Serum Institute, for state governments, for 50, the state government will pay 15,000 rupees. So in each case, put one figure against the other. For all state, every time state government buys a vaccine, a copy of Covaxin from Bharat Biotech, it transfers a bunch of money by way of cross-subsidizing the center's cheaper purchases. That cross-subsidy for every 50 vaccines purchased is 12,500 rupees on behalf of the state to the center. Remember, for the same 50 vaccines, center is paying 7,500, state is paying 20,000. So 12,500 is cross subsidy by the state governments for the central government's purchase. I'm not keeping the private sector out completely. Similarly, for Serum Institute purchase, because the state government's price is 300, for every 50 that the state government purchases, a subsidy of 7,500 is indirectly transferred to the center, which means this is not the private sector sales which are subsidizing. You want to say your objective is that manufacturers should get a remunerative price. So there should be flexible pricing. But at the same time you say, but 50% of it I will keep at this price, and then you deal with the rest. That is monopoly behavior of Milo Minder Bender Catch-22 style, because it is the state trading with the state. Because what is the state government? State government is also Indian government. सब लोग अशोक का एम्ब्लेम के नीचे काम करते हैं, सब लोग सत्यमेव जयते कहते हैं, right? Everybody sings the same national anthem, everybody salutes the same flag. It's the same country. But state governments are paying under this scheme twice as much to thrice as much for the same vaccine, and they only have 25% of it available. So tell me why I am wrong if I bring you the example of Milo Minder Bender, that here is somebody who's first monopolized all the market, all the produce is with him, then he fixes a price, then he decides who will sell it to, and some of it, because he has to also subsidize, in this case, the manufacturer from whom you bought half their production at a price that is not remunerative. So to make it worth their while, you are then picking the pocket. Okay, private sector, you can have 3,000 rupees. If somebody can afford it, will go, or people will not go, 25%. But can you do it to state governments? What is state government in India? It is the same as the central government of India. So how can you have different pricing? Once that different pricing was fixed, was set up, this scheme was dead on arrival, and somebody should have known. There are lots of things that we say in our native languages that are very difficult to translate, and I will come to that in a second. I will tell you what this means, but I will also give you an example from our history of license quota control Raj, and that is the reason I said that I will bring in I'd prefer to use the word control, because we have a history of license control quota Raj. So in that period, India had a system called the levy sugar system. This has only been abolished in 2014. In fact, there was a Rangarajan committee report. Dr. Rangarajan, noted economist, former RBI governor, advisor to Prime Minister under Manmohan Singh, really one of the most eminent economists for decades. He headed a committee that arrived at a report which said that this levy sugar system should change. And so 2014 it was withdrawn, but it continued on till then. What was the levy sugar system? The levy sugar system was that when a sugar factory in India, a sugar mill produces sugar, 10% of that, just 10% of that will be given by law to the central government at a fixed, very low price. Just as right now the central government says that whatever vaccines you produce, you will give 50% to us at this price. The difference is that was 10%, this is 50%. So if anything, this is levy sugar distortion multiplied 5 times over. And then the factories were told that while you give this to us at a very low price, so we can distribute it in the public distribution system on ration cards for poor people, which we need. The rest you can go by market-driven prices and make your profits. It also works, say, with our electricity. Most of our states give free or very cheap power to farmers, then slightly more expensive to householders, and then the most expensive to industry. And that makes our industry uncompetitive. And that is another distortion. But that is also a distortion relatively, which is nothing compared to the distortion of center creaming 50% of all production for itself. So this is the new levy vaccine scheme. This was the new levy vaccine scheme 7 years after the levy sugar scheme had been abolished as being destructive of sugar industry in India. Anti-consumer, anti-industry, anti-farmer. But you know, bad ideas keep coming back. It's very difficult. Even if you bury them 6 feet under, they still come back. So this is the levy vaccine policy, and I'm glad, and we should welcome the fact that it's now been withdrawn. Now, who wrote up this scheme? Was this scheme of multiple pricing designed to fail? It was going to fail, because what happened with levy sugar? If government was to get 10%, then every manufacturer, every sugar mill owner had the incentive to produce more than he was disclosing. And that happened with fertilizers also. So you said my capacity is 10,000 tons. So I have to give 1,000 tons to the government at a very low price, almost nothing price. That's fine. But I will tell you that 10,000 tons, but I will produce maybe 20,000 tons. So kaise pata lagega? Then government will say, I will post inspectors there. What is the inspector's salary? Most people can be bought. So bribery would start. So the same thing, I'm not saying it started with the vaccines. Vaccines are more complicated, but in the course of time, some of that would have started. Because you remember what? In a system, once you create friction, people will find the grease, because a system will either break up under friction, which is not good, or people will find the grease. Chances are people will find the grease. So whoever wrote these 3 pricing formula has to be a genius. In fact, I told you earlier on that in our own native languages, we have some expressions which are very difficult to translate, and they lose their value once you translate, but I will still try. So I would say there are 3 categories of geniuses, जो मैं हिंदी में बोलूँगा पहले. 3 category of genius होते हैं, बुद्धिमान. एक होते हैं साधारण genius, ordinary genius, run of the mill genius, right? एक होते हैं असाधारण जीनियस, दैट इज एक्स्ट्राऑर्डिनरी जीनियस, राइट, फैंटास्टिक. और एक होते हैं शिरोमणि जीनियस. ओह, एक आदि होता है. मतलब फॉर दैट काइंड ऑफ जीनियस, गॉड हैज टू हैव फाउंड spare time to produce one like that. So this scheme was written by some Shiromani genius or by a Shiromani genius government. To say now that this has failed is as much as Milo Minderbender saying the governments always fail, governments always pay, and governments are there to be in business, to do business with themselves, or to lose money, etc. Except in this case, a whole policy got distorted, and also a vaccination campaign which should have taken off much more effectively has suffered a setback. I'm hoping now that with this correction, this will be put back on rails.